Hi, it's Hope and welcome to the video. As you can tell by the thumbnail and the title of this video, this is going to be my November wrap-up and stats. So if you're new to the channel, how this works is I go through the books that I read in the second half of November because I always do a mid-month wrap-up. And then I also go through the stats. Well, technically I go through the stats first, then the books. So yeah, I will leave my mid-month wrap-up link in the iCard. I always forget which side it is, and as well as the description. But let's just go into the stats. I will also pop up a graphic on one of the sides here with all the stats so that you can see them if that's what you'd prefer. So I read 16 books this month, which totaled to 5,941 pages. The average star rating was a 4.46. And then on to the formats, I read 1 audiobook, 10 ebooks, and 5 physical books. As for the audiences or the age ranges, I read 5 adult books, 1 middle grade, 3 young adult, and 7 YA, which normally I read a lot more YA, although I have been slowly shifting into new adults and adults, so that does make sense. And then 1 middle grade because I did partially participate in Believe-a-thon, aka read 1 middle grade. Now onto the genres, which I don't even know these numbers, I haven't even looked at them before. So I read 4 contemporaries, 4 fantasies, 1 historical, 1 mystery, 2 paranormal, 3 romance, and 1 sci-fi. I only read 4 fantasy this month. Wow, that honestly shocks me. I feel like it's more. I typically read a lot more fantasy, I swear. This month was just, I guess, everything else filled. Now onto the books. I will talk a little bit about them, give my star rating, and all of that. So the first book that I read this month is City of Shattered Light by Winn, and this is a YA sci-fi, and I gave this 3.5 stars. Essentially, we have Asa, who is the daughter of this tech billionaire who owns this company, and she works for the company. And essentially, when her sister's consciousness ends up getting put into this thing, Asa ends up on the run because of this little thing that her sister's brain is being put into. Traits can be deleted and replaced and all that, so essentially her father can turn her sister into, well, not her sister, can take away the lack of ability to trust or the optimism or things like that. And then we also follow Riven, who is kind of a thief and a smuggler on the planet called Requiem. And essentially Requiem is, again, it's kind of filled with crime and all that, and she is just a thief and a smuggler with her and her friends. And when Asa ends up escaping her father, she ends up, the spaceship she's on ends up crashes on Requiem, and Riven and Asa kind of team up, and things happen. And this, let's just say, I was promised it to be sapphic, and it was barely sapphic. Essentially it was the last 10%, and all of that, but I did really enjoy Asa and Riven as characters and their story and the way that they grow and the way that they grow to trust each other, as well as I absolutely adored a side character named Ty. Literally, I was just anytime he was on the page, I was I really enjoy your personality, and I am very curious as to where the sequel will go, because based on the ending of this book, it has to have a sequel, although there's nothing announced yet. This book did just come out in October, so I don't expect news of either a sequel. It'll either be a sequel or a companion to it, but I'm not really sure. The next book I read was Tunnel of Bones by Victoria Schwab, and this is essentially a middle grade paranormal book, the first book being City of Ghosts, and essentially in, well, both City of Ghosts and Tunnel of Bones, we follow Cassidy Blake, who, after she almost dies, she ends up being able to see what is called the Veil, and the Veil is essentially where you go when you die, and it's ghosts and all of that. And she ends up in Tunnel of Bones in Paris, because her parents are filming this TV show based on like ghost hunting and all of that, and Cassidy obviously joins them, and she ends up having to kind of help the spirit of a little boy kind of cross over, essentially. That's kind of what it is. And this I listened to audiobook. I honestly really enjoyed this book. I gave it 3.5 stars, but I think it is just because middle grade really isn't for me that much, or at least this book wasn't for me. I definitely prefer more like mature novels, so like again, middle grade isn't for me, although I'll still read it every once in a while. The next book I read was Court of Dragons by Frost K, and this is a fantasy where essentially we have Wren, who on the day of her wedding gets attacked by the prince of a foreign land, and this causes a lot of her family to pass away, and even her to be wed, the person she's to be married, and essentially she gets kidnapped and taken prisoner by the prince and taken back to his country to be put into an arranged marriage with him. And by the title, there is dragons, and this is a enemies to lovers. It's really fast paced, and I really enjoyed Wren as a character. I ended up giving this 4 stars, and I like genuinely enjoyed it. Honestly, maybe a little bit more than I thought. I knew it was going to be like a, oh yeah, I'm going to like this, but I honestly enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoy the Prince Arik, who is the prince that takes Wren, like kidnaps her. I do really like him because even though he seems like the bad guy, well, you'll have to read the book to see where I was going to finish with that sentence. So I'm going to talk about the next 2 books because they're books 2 and 3 in a series, and I did also read book 1 earlier in the month, so you'll see that in my mid-month wrap-up if you watch that. But that being, the books being The Raven King and The King's Men by Nora Sakavic. These are book 2 and book 3 in the All for the Game trilogy, which is one of my favorite series. These I both gave 5 stars. This was also a reread, and if you do not recognize these covers, these are alternate dust jacket covers. Like, that shows how much I love these books. But essentially, in the first book, The Foxhole Court, which I should have just grabbed, I didn't think of that till now. So essentially, in The Foxhole Court, we follow Neil, who ends up getting offered a scholarship to this university to play Xe, and Xe is kind of like this game. It's kind of like lacrosse, but a little bit more violent and a little bit different, and it's a made-up game for this book. But essentially, Neil takes this scholarship to play Xe, even though it will bring him to the spotlight and bring things from his past to light, and his past is very dark. All of these characters' pasts are very dark. This is found family. It is sports, obviously. Me and sports don't usually go together, but in this series it does. I genuinely love these characters, and I mean, I tabbed the living crap out of this series, out of these books. So yeah, I just love them so much, and I'm already sitting here going, when can I reread it? When can I reread it? I just love this story and these characters so fucking much. The next book we have is Ravensong by TJ Klune. This is the second book in the Green Creek series, and I'm going to struggle to describe this book, so I'm just going to like kind of give the very, very briefest like description of the book. Essentially, this is book 2 in the Green Creek series. The first book is Wolfsong, where we follow essentially like the Bennett family, which are like a family of werewolves, and this boy named Ox ends up joining the family kind of type thing. And then in Ravensong, we are a year after Wolfsong, and we are following the point of view of Gordo, who is the essentially the Bennett's witch, and there is these like rogue Omegas coming to Green Creek for reasons, and that's literally all I can say. Literally how this series was sold to me as gay werewolves. That is like literally what it is. I gave Ravensong 5 stars. I will say one thing that I said in my vlog that I kind of find funny is like Gordo is old enough to be my father. He is 40-ish, I think. He says he's 40. And I'm sitting here at 17. Like, you're old enough to be my parent. And so it was a little awkward reading some certain scenes in that aspect. But I love these characters so much. I love the story. I just love the characters' dynamics and the way that the pack works. Like, the way that, like, even though whenever I refer to like the Bennett family, half the time I'm referring to like the whole pack, and just because it's found family in some aspects and then real family in other aspects, and I just love these characters so much, and I'm so excited to read Heartsong, which I will be reading in December to continue this series. And yeah. The next book was Liars by Dana Isley, and this is a dark mafia kind of story. It's the sequel to Scars, and essentially in Scars we follow Scarlet, who ends up getting kidnapped by these three guys, and essentially originally they wanted to give her back to her family because she ran away from her family 3 years prior after almost being murdered, but as they grow to come close with her, they decide to keep her as their own. And Liars continues the story after Scarlet is kidnapped and the guys are trying to save her. And I will say, this book I gave 4 stars. As much as I enjoyed it, I definitely preferred the first one, solely because it did feel like some certain things were like kind of almost redos of the first book. Don't get me wrong, I still love Liars, especially because there was definitely some like smut in there, like there was some kink, and like it was just really good. And the ending honestly shocked me. I was like, I didn't expect that. And I'm needing Omens, which is book 3, like now, but unfortunately it doesn't come out until, is it April 8th? April. It's sometime in April for sure, unless it gets pushed back or anything, or unless it's like Liars and gets released 2 weeks early, then it would be March. Who knows though. The next book is Defy the Night by Brigid Kemmerer. And this is a library book, so I do not own it technically, but I read it physically through my library. And honestly, I'm wishing I would have just bought a copy, because I kind of accidentally have a copy now on my Amazon wish list in order to buy it so I can annotate the crap out of it. This I gave 5 stars. So essentially we are in the kingdom of Kadala, and essentially there is this illness that is kind of running rampant, causing fevers and all of that. Kind of a little bit too like our own world, but moving on. But essentially we follow Tessa, who is an apothecary who ends up, she illegally delivers the medicine that makes this fever go away. Essentially the medicine is created by this plant called the moonflower, and essentially the moonflower is only available in 3 different sectors of the city, and it's pretty much only available to those sectors in those sectors. And her and her friend Wes end up kind of going through the city and stealing those to make the elixir. And then we also follow Prince Korik, who is the king's jester, and essentially that means he's almost like executioner, and he is the king's jester. His brother Harrison is the king, and that's kind of like all I can describe. But there is like a rebellion, and oh my gosh, there was a reveal in this that I think I jokingly said as like a ha 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 ha, but I was right, and I honestly love that I was right. I absolutely love Tessa and Korik so much. I love this story. I love this setting. I just love it so much. I gave this 5 stars, honestly. Like, I loved it so much. I loved it so much, but it's not like a new favorite. You get what I'm saying? When you love a book, but it's not a new favorite. But I literally am sitting here like, okay, is the book 2 up for pre-order? Because I will pre-order that the second it's available to pre-order, because I need to know how this story continues, because we have kind of like a subdued ending where everything's okay, but only for now. And I'm very curious to see where things will continue. And then the final book I read in November was Secret Court by Angelina J. Steffort, which is the 5th book in the Shattered Kingdom series. So I'm going to describe book 1, Shattered Kingdom, even though we are a long ways away from that first book. But essentially in Shattered Kingdom, we follow Gandrit, who after living in the Kamala Desert for 10 years has been kind of almost bought out to find this lost lord's son and she ends up receiving help from this fae named Nahilon, and that's all I can say really in this book. There is obviously fae, there's magic, there's dragons, there's, as we get later on, evil queens and prophecies and curses and an evil dragon king and like by secret court. Oh my gosh, shit is getting intense. I gave this 5 stars, although it's my least favorite in the series. It's still 5 stars because I love these characters so much. By Secret Court, we now have 7 different point of views, I believe. If my counting is correct, like, we have like 7 different point of views, and like we have so much going on, and I just love it. Like, again, I say this every time I mentioned it. If you love Throne of Glass, you will love this series because it has similar elements and like similar plot points, and then also just an overall similar vibe to that, and like I'd 100% recommend it to any fans of that series, and I am a fan of that series, so like I can vouch for that. Like yeah, and this I did get an arc, although I didn't finish it until the day it got released, so I kind of need to write my review for this this book. But yeah, those were the books that I read this month. Well, in the last half. Let me know what you have read in the comments below, or what you want to read in December, or if you read any of these books, or if any of these books sound interesting. But I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hopefully will see you in my next video. Bye!